Pink shirt, dancing,
Not
man.
dancing, playing drums today.
Or drums
Yeah.
and pink shirt. All right. Okay.
My wife said it's not pink. She didn't tell me what color it is, but I'm going with pink along with you. I agree. Very good.
Yeah, I don't think you could call that anything other than pink, at least from what I can see.
All right. Well, you know what?
Anyway, I think it's
No,
cool.
no offense, but I have to go with what Mrs. Brown says.
Okay.
So, how are you, my friend?
Doing okay.
Very good. Another week gone by. I don't know what's happening. It's like we're approaching the end of summer, and it feels like it was just the beginning of the year.
Yes, I know. It's pretty scary.
It's overwhelming. I'm guessing other people are feeling that way as well. But that is the nature of the beast these days, right? So that's the structure we hit sometimes. So let's get ready to dive in. I'm Kevin Brown. This is my lifelong friend and business partner, Tom Burton. We get together every Friday morning here on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and then later in the day on all the popular podcast formats. What we do each week is we review the Around the Horn and Wholesale Distribution and Manufacturing newsletter. That's a newsletter that we put together. It goes out to, I think we're close to 11,000 people now, Tom, are getting that. And we try and compile the news of the week in things like the economy and supply chain, mergers and acquisitions, sales and marketing, AI, technology, cybersecurity, all of the things that impact wholesale distribution and manufacturing. And what we try and do is unpack those articles a little bit, kind of reference what they mean and what they mean to wholesale distribution and manufacturing. So if you're with us live, let us know. It'd be great to, just saw Bob Britton came in, giving us a little aloha this morning. I could go change my shirt real quick and follow the aloha theme. And but let us know where you're at, that you're with us. If you are, though, listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Odyssey, whatever it might be, if you're listening there later in the day, just remember that what you're hearing is our discussion, but what the people that are live with us are seeing is the newsletter that we publish each week. If you don't get that newsletter and you would like to get it, there's two simple ways. You could email us at hello@leadsmarttech.com or go to the website for our podcast, which is www.aroundthehornpod.com. And you can see past episodes there. You can subscribe there and get the newsletter as well. We'd love to send that out to you. So that's just a quick reminder. If you're listening on the podcast, you won't see that. So we do this each week. We have guests oftentimes, and we have the same discussion. But there's a couple things I have left to do. First, if you like what you hear today, or have you been with us before, do us a favor. Hit the follow button on Facebook or LinkedIn Live, wherever you might be listening. And or if you're with YouTube, following us there, subscribe. And so you'll get the alerts when we go live. That'll get us out to other people. If you're listening on the podcast, please leave us a review and subscribe as well. And that'll help get that message out to others. Lastly, in closing, we can't do this each week because of the costs that go with this without the sponsorship. We're sponsored each week by LeadSmart Technologies, which is the company that Tom and I both work for. LeadSmart Technologies has developed a customer intelligence and CRM solution that's AI-enabled that helps wholesale distributions and manufacturers get deep insights into their customers, their teams, and their overall business to accelerate growth. So that's where we sit today. Tom, ready to get rolling?
Let's do it.
And you got a smile and a grin on your face there. What's going on behind the scenes?
Oh, nothing. Just thinking about some of the stuff we're going to be be about. So
yeah, I don't buy it. Anyways, good morning, Brian Hopkins as well. Good to have you with us. Afternoon for him, I guess.
Where's the Queen City? Is that New York?
Charlotte, I believe, is that they call the Queen City. Am I right, Brian?
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. See, I'm not the only one who doesn't know. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. We could have. All right. So our first trivia today is, what is the Queen City?
Well, it's a good thing is nobody said San Francisco yet. So
yeah, that's true. That may happen though.
That could be coming. I'm sure Brian will let us know. I'm happy to have him with us as well today, because Brian has told me a while back he has a standing lunch date on Fridays with his wife. So she must have punted him for the day, and he's joining us, which is great. So want to get ready and dive in here?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, each week as we review the newsletter, and again, if you don't get the newsletter, please let us know. But we have a series of topics that we go through. We start each week with the economy and supply chain. And part of this has been taken over by a little wager that Tom and I have about interest rates. Tom, what do you think from this CNBC article? Plus, We have another article that we post here from Reuters about just the economy in general of what we saw this week. Any pontificate?
What I think is what I told you earlier. If you don't like what somebody's saying about the economy, wait 15 minutes because it's going to change.
It's
And I mean, if you look at the sentiment and just the overall mindset that existed, just a week ago when we
right.
were talking about this, it's like you would have thought 6 months went by.
Yep.
So anyway, I mean, I think I do agree that there will absolutely be a rate cut in September. I don't think it'll be a half a point. I think it'll be a quarter point, unless there's something drastic that happens in the next 30 days. But aside from any sort of something drastic, and then after that, who knows, right? Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. This triggered a question for me. And you follow, you've always been more of a stock trader and following the markets closer than I do. We talk a lot, Tom, about a computer generated trading or auto trading and so forth that goes on so much of this. But I think what we've seen a lot of, and part of this was, the big kind of bloodbath was, I guess it would have been 2 weeks ago today and the following Monday, right? Where the market just started tanking. That all seemed to be not driven by computers. That was driving sentiment by traders in general that was really trying to kind of force the hand, I think, at least a little bit of the Fed, because I think what came out of that was, the calls, and that's to your point earlier, right? Wait 15 minutes was, it'll be 2 weeks ago, Monday and early next week. But there was people literally, well-known economists and traders and hedge funds and so forth that were calling for an emergency Fed meeting. And now there's this kind of balancing act going on, as we'll talk about with these articles. But do you have any thoughts, from your end on the difference between automated trading that's going on and then maybe some of the pressure that's getting put on the Fed by the markets that's probably not done that way?
Well, the drop that happened, 2 weeks ago,
Yep.
that was definitely driven by the algorithms and the computerized trading mainly because of the Japanese interest
Right.
rate
Okay.
increase.
Yep. I
And
forgot about that.
and that whole carry trade, the whole Japanese carry trade,
Right.
that a lot of companies have, a lot of hedge funds and a lot of computer-based trading platforms, and then it all
Right.
starts to unwind. Anyway, that's a whole nother.
Yeah.
If you remember, I did work for a quant hedge fund in
Well,
a
that's right. I
previous
forgot
life.
about that. You've worked
Right.
so many places.
Yeah, I have some experience with this, but we can
Mhm.
talk about that more another time. But what happened is that it dropped really quickly because of the Japanese piece. I don't remember what the timing was of the job. I think the job thing was the Friday before.
The jobs thing was on Friday. That
Right.
started some movement, and then the
Right.
yen trade piece
Right.
was over the
Right.
weekend, I believe.
Right. And so the two were not necessarily correlated, but they just happened to be happening at
So
the same.
let's quick pause on things for a minute. What we're talking about with the yen trade piece, if I've got this correctly, basically is in Japan. They've had zero interest rates forever. Foreign investors are coming in. They're borrowing money in Japan at zero interest. They're moving that out. They're moving it into other funds. They're taking profits from those funds, paying down those loans, and they're going through this cycle. And it's basically, I'll go to Japan to get my free money. Lots of that has happened. Super, super dangerous if you get caught with your pants down, which is just what happened. Is all of a sudden the central bank in Japan raised interest rates and actually had an interest rate, and all these folks started to panic.
Well, and they backed down, right?
Yeah.
Japan actually was
Right.
going to continue to raise, and they backed down, and they said,
Right.
"Whoa, we can't do this." What happened was, right, is
A huge default risk came quickly, right?
well, what happens is, right, is that the the so basically you're right. So people are borrowing money in yen at
Mhm.
0%.
Yep.
And a lot of people just invest, a lot of these traders are just putting it in T-bills, or,
Mhm.
taking it and putting it. The challenge or the problem is they're leveraged on top of that. So they leverage the leverage, sometimes 10 times, 15 times or
Mhm.
more. So now you have this huge amount of leverage. So even a quarter point increase in the interest rate can trigger a whole major unwinding of
Yeah.
some of the margins and everything that are there. That's what happened. Then Japan stepped in and said, whoa, yeah, sorry, we won't do this anymore or whatever. We're not going to. And then everybody kind of, okay, recovered and everything sort of went back the other way. In the meantime, I think I even said this on the call or on last week is, yeah, there was a miss, if you want to call it, in the job thing, but it certainly didn't look like it was the end of the world that
Mhm.
was there. And then
Yeah.
you started to see other data that goes, well, wait a minute, maybe we overreacted. And so I think there was a number of things that occurred along the way. And yes, a lot of overreaction along the way. So
Good. So back to the articles that we're talking about here and what's really happening. So your take on the bets are locked in um, for the interest rate cuts. What do you actually see happening?
like I said, I see September for sure,
Okay, quarter point.
quarter point. And
Okay.
then I think there's only two more meetings after that. I don't
Mhm.
think there's three. There's November and December. And I think if the economy stays strong, like it's showing that it's been, or there's not like a major drop in the job market, I think the job market will be the kind of the driver on this. If that stays reasonably strong, then I think I have a 50-50 chance of winning. I think if the job market continues to show weakness, then yeah, we'll definitely get another cut and I'll be owing you a stake. So I don't feel good about my position, but I'm not ready to throw in the towel yet.
I'm glad this enthusiasm and optimism you have that's so unrealistic is not carried over into business, and you're just thinking about it on when
Hey,
stakes are at risk here.
that's right. I have to have delusion somewhere.
The that delusional is it's the perfect word.
There's a fine line between optimism and delusion.
Right. I'm going to stick with. I think we're going to see, and this is what I hope, and I think it's the little bit that I know. I think it's the right move. Is we're going to do a quarter point three times, potentially this year, for sure twice. But I think they want to get closer to a full percentage versus a half a percentage, and they'll be cautious how they do it. Now that statement ties exactly to how you started the show. Wait 15 minutes,
Yeah, wait 15
right?
minutes.
Because that could change based. But what we're seeing in the last 2 weeks, I would think that what they're probably thinking about is quarter, and then let's see what happens in the last meeting of the year, right? And do we just do another quarter with something in the first, knowing that they could do a half a point in the first quarter next year?
Mhm.
So we'll see where we end up. But a couple of good articles there. One from CNBC that we published today, and two from Reuters. And the interesting thing is, and my last point on that is the Reuters article was about more Fed officials lined up behind the September rate cut. And the two that they reference in there had been very, very, really bearish on doing necessarily any cuts this year. So they're both looking at this, but I think they're referencing quarter point cuts too. So again, it's just so funny with the idea behind what happens this week versus what happens next week. So tune in next week
Yeah,
for the around the horn and interest rates discussion. So.
that's right.
All right, as we jump ahead here, we're going to talk. This is part of our supply chain and the economy segment. We posted an article here from a distribution publication, and it talks about the firmer freight rates on tap for 25. This is U.S. trucking rates, and so they talk about in this article. They use 5 major indices for this: freight volumes, freight rates, fleet capacity, fuel costs, and financing costs. So this isn't talking about what we talk about typically oftentimes is what's going on in the shipping world and supply chain issues tied to container rates on ships or the Suez Canal issues or whatever we might be chatting about. This is about, over the ground rates, trucking rates in the U.S. They look to be having really favorable conditions starting in the beginning of the year, and by next spring, a really balancing of that. And again, here we are. A big part of it that they talk about here is tied to interest rates.
Yeah.
Right. So interesting. The good news is, living here in California, it's been probably over a month since I've had to pay $5 a gallon for gas. So fuel rates seem to be tapering further. And I know for those of you who are listening I think for our US listeners that are outside of California, they probably choke at paying $4 even. But then if we get to our friends in Germany or Italy or other parts of Europe, they're looking at that and saying, what a bargain.
Yeah, well, it's always been a bargain, right? So
Well, when
comparatively,
you look at what
right.
last time I was in Europe, I think it was 350 a liter.
Yeah,
Three, three,
right.
three, three, it's, 3.5 euros per liter was a crazy number.
You know, we didn't include this article, but there was an interesting article I read this week where there was a survey done of consumers, and there was a consumer belief that as you hear the inflation rate going down into the 2%,
Hmm.
that somehow that is going to equate to price cuts.
Oh,
So, in other words, the fact that I'm paying whatever I'm paying at the grocery store, as the rates come down, then my prices are going to drop down.
right.
And that's a big
Fallacy.
that's a big fallacy,
Yeah.
right? And so, but if there's a perception that my spending power is going to be increasing,
Hmm.
no, your spending power is just decreasing at a lesser rate,
Yeah.
basically, along the way. But related to that, and then they went one step further and said that the spending power, in a lot of, whether it's fuel or certainly in groceries and food, probably close to 30% less spending power for groceries
Well.
and essential items, 30 and 50% higher when you talk about eating out
Hmm.
compared to where we were just 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, and there is no sign that those prices are going to start deflating, even though the interest rates are going down, which I just thought was an interesting viewpoint. I
You,
don't know. I want to bring up Bob's question. Are gas prices being held artificially low due to being an election year? It's a good question. I thought about this because gas
I
prices
thought of
usually
that.
go up significantly in the summer, and we
Mhm.
haven't seen that this year.
Summer blend, right here in
Yeah,
California. That's
yeah,
that's our issue,
yeah,
right? Is they change the additives and so forth to the fuel. Well, great comment on that. As long as they stay down, I'm good.
yeah.
Uh, but
Let's
the
just keep the election year going, right? Let's just
yeah,
keep.
I kicked off. I don't know. I think it's 9 trips over 2.5 months earlier this week, and was in Denver for an affiliated distributors event. It was just a great event. But it's funny. I was thinking about it as I was getting ready to head to the airport. We were talking about costs and hotel costs, and especially when you're at a conference type hotel where you're not near downtown, or you can just walk down the street for other meals. Prices are through the roof in general. But I laughed because I said, you know what, I'm going to eat at the airport in a sit down restaurant at the airport, because even airport food's going to be cheaper than this hotel.
That may be true,
you
and that's
know
pretty pathetic. Yeah,
Yeah, the it is, but it was factual when all was said and done. So it's astounding though. One of the articles that we talked about earlier though did relate to the fact of food costs coming down. Although it was eggs and another commodity had gone up a little bit over the last month, but in general we're starting to see a little bit of a dip with that. So I do the most of the
not
growth.
seeing it at my grocery store.
Well, I was just gonna say I do most of the grocery shopping in our house, so I'll the other party in this marriage takes care of Amazon, and I take care of the grocery store. So I'll see if I see anything. So let's jump ahead, Tom. Let's get to our manufacturing and distribution segment. Um, there was a segment in here came from Industrial Distribution Magazine, and it just talked about applied industrials full quarter sales being up besides sluggish fourth quarter in general. The only reason I really included that is, again, a quote in there from one of the executives at Applied was talking about the fact that they believe industrial activity could remain muted near term as customers await clarity on interest rates in the election. So I think we're going to probably continue to see a lot more of this. I'll just say vacillating, simmering, kind of up and down a little bit until the end of the year. I mean, the election thing is kind of going to be an interesting piece too that we haven't much talked about.
I wanted to spotlight Bob. He said he went to the movies and paid $28 for an icy, a small popcorn, and a medium soda. I hope it was a good icy. I hope it was a
Yeah.
large one. So
We talked about going to the movies recently, and there's one of the Cinépolis right by the house where you can get the fluffy chair and bar service, and we haven't been to that since. I don't think we've been to the movies like that since pre-pandemic, and it was $150 to go do that. I think, pre-pandemic. I can only imagine what it is now with you have a couple cocktails and an appetizer and a movie, and boom. So,
hey, I just want to go back to this article that you were talking about.
mhm.
What was it in there that is causing, whether it's interest rates and election, that people are they just waiting to see what happens? They don't want to make a wrong move. What is it that's going on?
Well, I think what we're seeing, and it ties to some of the next article we're going to talk about manufacturing tech orders in just a moment, and I can just prognosticate a little bit on this myself, but I think what we're starting to see and talking to some distributors out there is that their customers aren't pushing big levels of inventories up, and they're balancing out what they're doing. They're buying what they need, but they're not buying any excess. They're not, and they're being very cautious while they're waiting and see what happens. Because if you think about it, if you're talking about a capital expenditure versus a commodity for a job or a project, but if you're talking about a capital expenditure, and you can look at that and say, wait a minute, if my cost of money goes down by a percentage point by waiting for 3 months or 4 months,
Yeah.
it's a big impact when you start talking about large capital expenditures in that setting. So I think even when we talk about commodity spending in this setting, that would impact a company like Applied as well. Here is that people are not necessarily replenishing in the same amount and so forth. So I think that's what we're seeing. And then I think there's a lot of concern too. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I think it was last week we had an article that they can't remember who published the article, but it interviewed a number of wholesale distributors across the country. And it was one of those articles where you were not unclear on the political bend of the people that they had in there. But the concern is in some parts of the country, specifically in the Southeast, with battery plants and stuff like that that are being built, is that look, if you end up with the current administration, in the Democratic Party continuing to push through things and wanting to get rid of internal combustion engines and so forth, then these projects for all these battery plants are probably going to push ahead, and other stimulus spending is going to stay there as they're going to push dollars in. You've got the other party whose candidate is suggesting that maybe there's going to be some balancing on these things, and maybe some of these other big projects won't continue. So, I think you've got probably some slowdown in some of the large projects as well. So I think we've got to wait and see that. I think right now, probably our takeaway today will probably be the election and interest rates are probably going to be the two biggest drivers on things in the next, say, 180 days, probably still of what, because even once we have a result on what we see the year end is with interest rates, even, let's just say they drop a half point, it's going to take a couple of months of figuring out what that's really going to do to things. And then the election, I don't know that we're going to see any knee-jerk reactions to things.
Well, it's an interesting, as I was listening to you talk about it, right? It goes back to what we were just talking about if you don't like what somebody's saying, wait 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I think that creates a lot of indecision.
Yeah.
Because
sure.
it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, if I wait 15 minutes, maybe it'll be better. It's like, or I don't want to make the wrong decision or make the wrong choice. And God, if I did this now and it turned out I could have waited a month or whatever. So it's an interesting, all of this back and forth sort of noise can definitely create a lot of indecision.
I mean, I just give you the most simplistic example of that. I'll use myself, right? My car lease is up I think the 17th of next month. I went and kind of looked at the numbers, and buying it out of the lease, it's worth more than the residual of the payoff on the lease is. I'd like to get a new car, but you know what? I'm in the exact same boat, because no matter what the rates are, my payment's going to go down by buying my car out of my lease, which is the fastest and easiest way to do it. And then let's see what happens in January December with the year-end deals, and maybe we've had a couple of rate cuts, and I can almost guarantee you where you're going to see probably the first big benefit to any rate cuts is you're going to get back to those zero interest loans and so forth. The Volkswagen dealership by our house, I saw the other day, they had on certain models, they have zero interest for it was 18 months or something like that. So I think that may be the first place we see it. So I'm looking at it from my view from a consumer standpoint is I'm going to wait till the end of the year because it's easy to sign a document and just keep my car. Just do
Yeah.
that with a bank, right? Do it electronically. And then, you know what, if all of a sudden there's, great deals, lease deals at the end of the year, I'll make a move then. If not, I don't have to. So, yep. Good.
All right.
Jump ahead here.
Yep.
All right. So let's bypass time. We posted an article about manufacturing tech orders growing. There was some similar discussion in that as well about interest rates as well. So while those manufacturing tech orders grew, those are that data that comes from the USMTO, which published by the Association for Manufacturing Technology. Those are a reasonable barometer to be looking at too. And one of the things that we try and do, I think we've got some new folks with us today from what I saw on a couple of the different platforms where we can see who's coming. We try and look regularly at a lot of the different barometers, so to speak. The Fed looks at some very specific things, but there are some other bellwethers that come, and this manufacturing tech orders is one we look at every few months as well. So we'll always continue to try and look at these different barometers, so to speak, that we could look to. Good. All right. Mr. Mark Dancer, if you haven't seen Mark's Substack before, he's been writing forever. I think Mark is a fellow with NAW, and he does stuff with the National Association of Wholesalers. He does stuff with the National Association of Electrical Distributors as well. He has a Substack, which is kind of the replacement these days for most. By the way, Tom, let's address Bob's question there real quick. So as we talk about manufacturing tech orders, it's not really Bob's software that they're talking about in that setting. It's technology tools within the manufacturing setting that is really
robots
typical.
and things like that, right?
Exactly right.
Like that. So that would be definitely more CapEx, as he's saying.
Exactly right. CapEx would be the exact piece of that. And so when you start thinking about automated CNC machines and stuff like that, is a lot of what that ties to. So great question, and we appreciate that. So back to Mark's thing. Mark has a Substack. It is called Mark Dancer on Flourishing Business. He calls it Food for the Supply Chain Soul, which is pretty cool. So he wrote an interesting article. It kind of ties to some work that he's doing with another gentleman in the tech world. But Tom, you had some couple of thoughts that you liked about this that talk about tying manufacturers, distributors, and the things they can do to help communities.
Yeah, well, he kind of had two takes.
Mm-hmm.
One, you have kind of two ways of communicating, right? You can collaborate better with your partners,
right?
But that's more for your own purpose. And I do think there's a lot of opportunity that's going to be coming for more enhanced and greater and more productive collaboration. But then what he was talking about was, how do you then take that collaboration and actually work and figure out within a community, within an area, right? Region, locality, whatever, how do you help make that community better by working together with whatever the community challenges and problems are? So rather than just looking at, hey, I got my business and I'm selling my stuff to whoever buys and you're selling your stuff to whoever buy, maybe we look at things a little bit differently and say, look at a community. How can we help the community a bit more holistically and work together to accomplish that? Very foreign concept, maybe a bit more of a dream than a reality, but I think that is an interesting, and I think it's the only reason that I consider it maybe interesting is the fact that I believe that could be possible. Again, when you start factoring in some of the things we've talked about of AI, blockchain, some of the capabilities that are going to enable this ability for us to become less siloed, right? It's like, you just look at all the businesses that we have, all these siloed businesses, whether it's in our industry or industrial distribution or any industry, and everyone just is trying to compete with each other and get their bite of the apple versus really the opportunity to collaborate more. So I thought it was an interesting take. And
no, it's good. I'm probably going to end up referencing this a few times today because, one of my favorite things to do is get out and talk to customers, whether they're our LeadSmart customers or their prospects and people within distribution and manufacturing. And so I was at this event this week and I got to talk to both manufacturers and distributors. I had an opportunity to speak at this affiliated distributors event on kind of a general conversation on, we call it the data gold mine within wholesale distributions businesses, and it's great. I really enjoyed talking to the group. Had a room full of people, but then I think I had 15 appointments, 15-minute appointments in the booth, and then a handful of discussions at cocktail receptions and lunch and things like that. And there is just still a mixed bag out there in, August of 2024 of wholesale distributors who are still, use the word anxious versus scared, but still anxious and uncomfortable about sharing significant amounts of data back with the factory or their manufacturer partners. And, we talk nonstop about partnerships, and they all go to these meetings about partnerships. But at the end of the day, and this was not some of my conversations. It's not like it's, one branch Joe with 6 employees. This was some large organizations with, 100+ employees and so forth. I had a couple of discussions, and there's just still that caution. And, it's interesting in this day and age, it's hard to have information that somebody else can't find. Really, it makes me tie in and think about, historically, like a lot of the non-compete contract stuff with employees is, you can't compete if you have some very specific data about an organization. But, at the end of the day, when you can buy lists about just about anything you want, yeah, the distributor might know exactly how many pieces of sandpaper were purchased in that factory, but you can buy a list of commodities purchased, and your industry well enough. So I think I just look at it as it's really time for everybody to look at how do we collaborate and share data, not just because it's being forced by a buying group or a contractual arrangement that says, if you don't share this with me, I won't give you this discount, but really changing that mindset back to what you were talking about, and Mark is talking about somewhat in this article, is how do we just put our collective voices, data, experience, tribal knowledge, all of those things together to, in this article talks about, help the community as well, but really help both of our businesses thrive.
Mhm.
So anyways, that's, the end of the game on that. So Bob made a comment about poor relationship between vendor and customer. I think what you would really find, at least in the discussions I'm describing, is most of these people would still tell you they have a great relationship with their vendors. It's just not a collaborative relationship at the level that it could be. Right now, it's easy for me to say we, have our LeadSmart Connect tool that can bring manufacturers and distributors together to share data, but lots of them are doing a great job. But there's still that mindset. Here we are in 2024. It's, well, I'm not going to tell them who I sell their stuff to. It's like, just not that hard to figure out these days.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to be able to demonstrate some examples of how that really can improve and
Yeah.
change. But yes, I do think there's still a lot of that anxiousness of, hey,
Right.
I got to keep everything tight to the vest.
Yep.
So,
Yep. If you might sell direct there is
right.
really the
And
idea.
that's what Bob was asking about, is e-commerce creeping
Yeah.
in. Oh, well, then they'll be able to go sell to my customers on their e-commerce
Yeah.
site, or right. It's like it is a bit of a scarcity mentality that there is no shortage. And I think that if we end up, I mean, heck, we even see this in our own business. I find that every time that we really partner with others,
Mhm.
things go better.
Yeah.
Every time that we try and go and no, we're going to try and do our own thing, right? It's harder.
Yep.
And so I just think the world we're in. Yes, I agree with Mark, and I agree that that's the direction to be. At
Yeah,
least,
there's an e-commerce component of it, and the other side of it is there's a manufacturer I can think of in really safety equipment space. And in the last 30 years, they've sold through distribution, gone direct without distribution, gone back to distribution, and then gone hybrid where they're selling online and a little bit direct to certain types of accounts and selling through distribution. So a big part of this is, hey, if you know where I'm selling your product, you might go sell it to them directly. Or if you know exactly where I'm selling your product, you might go there with somebody else as well.
Yeah.
Too many people out there, too much information available, and too easy to get the information about what's going on. And great comment. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Partnerships say go together to go far. So
Right.
I like that. Good. Let's bump into our e-commerce and marketing segment. We haven't started on yet today. The future of B2B experience, human versus machine. This is from Marketing Profs or marketingprofessionals.com. Tom, any first glance takeaways at that?
I honestly, the article wasn't all that thrilling to me, but I thought they made a good point about all of these things are only as powerful as the people and the strategies that are behind them. And I'm really seeing now, as we start to have more AI conversations with our prospects and customers, it goes back to the strategies. It's like what got you here won't get you there.
Right. Great point.
Because the strategies, the approach, the way that AI works compared to traditional technology
Yep.
and so forth is so different, and you can't just shoehorn in these things into the ways that are there. So I like that take about, hey, we need to be thinking differently strategically. We need to be thinking about how we do things, how we do people, all that kind of stuff. It's just I thought that was a good thing. Some of the other stuff was kind of, a lot of stuff that you've seen over and over and over.
Well, I took a little different take on it. There was a great quote there that they talked about: with great data comes great responsibility. And what I really liked is they were talking about chat bots and all the different tools that we have that we can embrace and enhance in our businesses. But the whole focus on it, right, was on customer experience. And I really liked that there was a bend to this article that really talked about the human interaction along with the technology. And I talked about this in my talk earlier in the week. And then it was funny. I just, Brian Hopkins was with us earlier, posted a LinkedIn comment this morning about a webinar that the distribution strategy folks did earlier in the week. They did it Wednesday because I was literally packing in my hotel room, had my computer on, was listening to it. And there was a lot of discussion there about not eliminating people, but how people and AI tools can be working together. And this is really, I think, what we're starting to see so much more of. I talked about it in my talk earlier this week in Denver as well about, don't be too overly concerned about, eliminating jobs. Look at how could you keep your same head count, but repurpose how we're doing things and train people differently. And there was some nice pieces of this where, our tribal knowledge that can get into the system. And one of the great examples that was I'm shifting gears on where we're getting our data from, but on the distribution strategy group's webinar this week was, thinking about not necessarily just a chatbot experience, but an experience where the AI can see, because you're connected for the phone call into your CRM. If your CRM ideally is AI enabled and can get broad information across your organization, like we can with LeadSmart Channel Cloud, right, where we're looking at e-commerce, we're looking at ERP, we're looking at marketing automation, maybe some other data sources, where now the AI tool says things like, hey, it's Tom Burton calling, and here are the things that he probably is calling about. And now it's like, Tom has a line item on invoice 1234 that hasn't shipped yet. It's scheduled to ship on Tuesday. Tom has a back order on these 3 things. We don't have an update yet, but we're supposed to be getting an update tomorrow from XYZ manufacturer. Tom's account is past due. All of those things that through robust CRM can even be fed right to the salesperson based upon who's calling. So these things start popping up as they're answering the phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now the customer gets this amazing experience where they got served by AI with their answers super quick, but a human that they have a relationship conveyed the information to them, right?
Well, and I listened to that webinar as well. You can go one step further, right, about really providing insight. So if the customer's on the phone, maybe and calling about a query or a situation or whatever, but you can also offer some insights in their business that says,
Yeah.
hey, did you know, or, hey, I just, wanted to fill you in on this or whatever. I mean,
Well,
that's
it's the white space. It's the white space example, right?
right.
It's like, hey, I just noticed that you used to buy this from us, and you're not buying this from us apparently anymore. And and that's doing a customer a service by reminding them, because sometimes they don't even know,
Yeah. But
right?
even if it's just, there's other things you can, are you realizing that there's a project in your area or
Right. Yep.
whatever? I mean, who knows, right? There's a lot
Yeah.
of different ways
Absolutely.
to add value. And then people want to talk to salespeople because they're actually an asset versus
Right.
something else that's there. So,
Yep. Yep.
all
Very
right.
good. Let's
Let's
jump ahead here. It's time for us to do our regular con corner, as I call it. Um, Head of the FTC, Lena Khan, is jumping into fake reviews on e-commerce. There's probably a need for some of this, but is it from the FTC? And is it from somebody trying to grasp a little more limelight before the doors close on them, if there's a new or if there's a Republican in
I just,
the
I
White
mean,
House?
so first of all, yes, fake reviews are a problem. But if
Yep.
I have a company or if I have a website and I'm getting fake reviews, then that's my problem to figure out how to overcome that. I can't believe that of all the things that they could possibly at the FTC be thinking about and considering, fake reviews should be high on their list. I
Right.
just I can't imagine that that's got to be high on the list of all the other things that they could be dealing with. So I think I understand that it's a problem. I'm not saying it's not a problem, but I think doing it through the FTC and what they're doing is absurd. It's not enforceable. It's just like, what is she doing here? It's just no, I know we were chatting about this, right? You could see that as the ramifications, right? If you're launching a B2B commerce site or
Yeah.
whatever, now you got something else you got to think about, you know?
Well, that's why we included this article, right? Because there's a big push for either expansion of e-commerce or getting into e-commerce and wholesale distribution in general. And as that happens, there's going to be, you put up a new website, I'm sure you're going to be hearing from lots of people that want to help you get reviews, right? Well, it's time. We've really got to be paying attention to this. Now, the FTC is saying that estimated revenue for services impacted by consumer reviews is $341 billion. So that's why they think that it's okay for them to put their thumbprint on this. But Amazon's working hard on this. They've got, together with Booking.com and TripAdvisor and some others, they put together the Coalition for Trusted Reviews. I'm sure that's them trying to bypass having any regulatory impact where they could get fines and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's obviously is a big problem, and it could be an issue coming up for wholesale distribution as well, which is why we included it. But part of this, I just don't want to do personal attacks here, but if you watch the history, as long as this show's been around and this particular head of the FTC has been there, there sure seems to be some grabs for limelight and where I'm going to be when I'm not here anymore, because she's gone after some kind of crazy stuff over the years.
Yeah.
And even some of the stuff she's been chasing Amazon about, where they've kind of almost flicked her off like a fly a few times and paid a couple little fines. And then she's had some big wins as well. But some of the stuff that they're trying to jump into with the FTC, I really kind of question. So, but there's no question about the impact, and it has a negative impact as well. And you think about it, if and let's just talk about this for a second again. If I'm a distributor or a manufacturer and I'm selling in marketplaces, whether it's a vertical marketplace or it's an Amazon or whatever it is, bad reviews can impact me horribly because of return issues and so forth, because the falsehoods that could be going along with that. So it is something to be paying attention to, just how you manage it.
Yeah, no, it's a situation that should be, of course, managed.
Yeah.
It applies to your brand, it applies to your result. It just seems like this is kind of a weird way to go
Yeah.
about it, but
Here's the pro tip of the day for online reviews. Look at a handful of the 5 stars, look at a handful of the 1 stars, look at a couple of the ones in between, and make a decision based upon what you're seeing. right?
Well, and AI is also gonna come into play to help
Yeah.
summarize a lot of these reviews, look
Well, it's
for the
already
pain
already
points.
doing it on
That's hard.
Amazon, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, the Amazon's doing a nice job of that already. It's
right,
showing you many people are saying this, some default, detractors say this.
right.
Overall, this is what we're seeing. But you know what? At the end of the day, we have to take some responsibility as consumers as well and
Mhm.
buyers. So good. All right. Well, let's jump into something that I think is kind of interesting about promises. This article is B2B campaigns with clear customer promises triple market share gains. That's pretty significant. So, any thoughts from you on that before we dive too far into it?
Well, on the other, I think this was a great article. I
Yeah.
thought this was a really well put together article, really well written, and a lot of good information. We were talking about brand. Was it last week or the week
Yeah.
before?
Yeah.
I
Because
don't
last week we had a discussion about
I don't
brand.
recall. And basically, what they're saying here is a way to really kind of put a stake in the ground as it relates to your brand is to kind of come up with what is your big promise.
Mhm.
And I agree with it. I agree that if you can be clear in what your big prom and this isn't like, oh, you're going to make a million, like not these sort of ROI claims and stuff like that.
Yep.
This is more of as a company and the products that your company sells or what you're bringing to the market. What is the big promise? What is the valuable outcome that you're providing to that? And
Yep.
just be very, very clear and concise with it. And what they said is that companies that do that get a 3 times more, what is it, or more likely deliver increases in
Increase in
market share
market share. Yep.
and 2.5 time increase in brand health. And again, based on some surveys and some really good data to back it up. So
Well, I
I
mean,
think it's very,
think
very
about the numbers that go with that, right? If you're talking about 3x increase in market share and I mean, 3 times your market share by doing some tools within marketing. Now, this doesn't mean that it's simple and easy to go do, but when you do it right, and it's kind of funny, it made me think about, at LeadSmart, we operate on the EOS or the entrepreneurial operating system, and that is a component of EOS is deciding if you're going to have a guarantee or a promise within your business. And so I think that's kind of interesting. The quote that I liked, it says here, this allows buyers they can cut through the noise and messiness of decision making by offering a clear and simple articulation of the value delivered by a brand to its customers, right? So I understand what this brand does, what they stand for, and what they're promising me they're going to do for me. And if I do that correctly, this is saying, guess what? It can 3x my market share. And this is, one piece of research, but what if you could double your market share?
yeah, well, it makes sense, right? And I think, hey, at LeadSmart, we need to do a better job of this,
Yeah, I
right?
was just thinking that. Yep.
I mean, we need to do a lot better job of this. And I
Yep.
think we have at certain times, I think we've had a good big promise and then something happens and it gets diluted and stuff like that. But I think that, yeah, it's a big, big deal. And I do think it becomes the heart. Look, there's so much noise out there, right?
Mhm.
A promise like that provides clarity if it's understandable,
Right.
right? And it's not just a bunch of hype. It's not hype. It's really that promise as to what you're going by working with my company, what is the outcome that you can expect,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I think it really helps cut through the noise, which is why you see that brand lift that they're talking about there.
Well, it does. And, I just went back and I looked at the article real quick there. And this was a survey of 700 companies slash brands. So it's not like,
Right.
hey, we surveyed 5 guys over here, right? So it's pretty, the magnitude of this is significant of the details. So I think this is something that I'm going to continue to look for information on because I think it's pretty valuable to share with our audience here as well. So good stuff there, Tom. You want to jump in and talk a little bit about technology, cybersecurity, and AI? We occasionally talk about AI here, don't we?
Yeah, I don't know. We can skip all this.
This we can go. I actually do like. There's a good article here posted again. I should have said this again a little bit earlier. If you're listening on the podcast, you will not be seeing what the folks that are watching us live or recording on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. We're looking at the Around the Horn and Wholesale Distribution and Manufacturing newsletter. It goes out every Friday to 10,000 plus people. If you don't get that, this is where we get these articles and we review them. You can get that by emailing at hello@leadsmarttech.com, or going to the
We have a new
website.
email address. I wasn't
Yes,
aware of that
we'll
one.
set that up really quick, will you? Hello@leadsmarttech.com, and www.aroundthehornpod.com is the website for the show. And you can get a lot of past shows and other information on the website, and subscribe to the podcast, as well as subscribe to the newsletter. So if you'd like to do that. But now, as we go into our segment, we have like 6 segments or 7 segments, I think now. But technology, security, and AI, what does your CEO need to know about cybersecurity? And my big takeaway from this, Tom, and get your thoughts, was they made a comment here. It says 10 years ago, cybersecurity was seen as an IT and compliance issue. If there was a breach, the impact wasn't seen as significant, and the CEO's role was primarily to make high-level decision during the incident. The difference now is the potential threat to business operations and reputations, and CEOs are tasked with integrating cybersecurity into overall business strategy and aligning cybersecurity with business goals. If I narrowed this down to 4 or 5 sentences: integrating cybersecurity into overall business strategy and aligning cybersecurity with business goals. Big deal.
Well, and yeah, and going one step further, right? If you don't take this seriously from a business perspective, you are guilty of malpractice, is basically
Yep.
what they're saying.
Yep.
So, and that's what they were talking about, that guy that the picture's there. I
Yep.
think it was United Health, the CEO of United Health. And he testified in Congress, and he was all these excuses. Well, we acquired a company and we didn't get around to putting in our security properly in there. And they're looking at him going, and why is that okay?
Yeah.
And
Well, they
so,
didn't let
yeah,
him off the hook, did they?
no. So no, it's becoming it's become a liability, right? A big liability. It's not just a technology issue. It's a business issue all the way around.
Yep. No, so something to be paying attention to if you're an executive or senior executive, even um, in the in any space, right? This is something you got to pay attention to. But I think what's going on now is, specifically within wholesale distribution, is we're seeing far more um, CTOs and CIOs, chief information officers, chief technology officers, that aren't just they're not just title related. These are people that have backgrounds and experience in doing these things, and having those people integrated into executive management, making presentations to the board. And this could be about digital transformation as well as cybersecurity. But it's nice to see this in our, I'll just use the terms, kind of sometimes slow adopter marketplace of manufacturing and wholesale distribution for overall tech. It's nice to see some of this migration and this move along the way. So it's good. Have an article here about integrating generative AI into supply chain operations. That's from Supply and Demand Chain Executive Magazine. Just some good kind of resources in there, some tips that go with how to do that better and what the value can be, the value payoffs. They talk about pilot programs and assessments and scalable implementation plans. We've talked about quite a few things before. If you're looking at adding in a lot of AI and generative AI tools into supply chain operations, mostly on the manufacturing side, this talks a lot about. There's some pretty good tips in that article. So,
Yep.
all right, what are we looking at next here? AI, the digital bridge to Industry 4.0, huh?
Yeah. Again, it's a little bit interesting, and I know we want to move along because we still have quite a bit to cover here. But
Yep.
and we see this, right? A lot of companies, especially in this industry, are operating with what they say clipboard,
Mhm.
pencils, and human only. In this case,
Right.
assembly lines or whatever. We see it in the front office as well, right? They're using clipboards, pencils, and spreadsheets, and then they're looking to leap from there to AI.
Mhm.
Um, and at first I was like, I'm not so sure, but as I think more about it, it may actually work, because I think that it might be easier for a lot of companies to move from the sort of manual, non-technology way of doing things into an AI centric way of doing things and adopting technology that way, rather than the traditional technology that we know with the transactions and the dashboards and the reports and all
Right.
of those things that go with it. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% convinced. I want to investigate this for myself a little bit more, but I find it as an interesting thing. And that's what they're talking about, is that some of these things are fading away as people are kind of leapfrogging from manual to much more sophisticated automation.
Yep. So this article, I would agree with you on this, and it's interesting. In this article, they reference a 2023 survey found that 69% of North American manufacturers were still collecting most of their data through non-digital methods. That's got to change fast if you want to keep up. And so this article references Industry 4.0, and it says, Industry 4.0 is also known as the fourth industrial revolution. What does that mean? 4.0 generally covers four categories of technology: connectivity and data, analytics and intelligence, human machine collaboration, and advanced engineering. So I thought those were the kind of nice to look at that from those four components of what we're referencing as we talk about Industry 4.0. I'm going to try and remember those for future thoughts. But one of the things that I liked most was the human machine collaboration. So when we start putting, whether it's AI tools or machine learning tools and so forth, into our operations, I really want to continue to look at this as this is people and technology. It's not people or technology. And so often we have that thought that says, well, I have to move everything over to all technology driven. And that's not the case. It is people love people, and people still know great things that machines will never know. And when you put those things together, that's where you get the great power.
Totally agree.
Good. Good. All right. Let's move into our further into our sales and M&A segment. AI is a game changer for sales coaching. We're going to kind of just hit some quick overviews of that. The core of really what that was talking about is that, and this was a survey that was done by a couple of organizations, Trend Index's annual report, and then LinkedIn and Microsoft were both involved. But, they talked about the challenges that happen in most sales coaching, which is, first off, insufficient coaching. Second, that they call it limited practice, which means they do maybe some role playing and some things like that, but nobody likes that in this day and age. And they said bias in the role playing, traditional role playing with managers and peers, can be affected by unconscious bias that can negatively impact the whole coaching session. So, and then, what we're really relying on is how good is our coach in that setting. But the article talked about really some cool things about like just-in-time learning, role playing that is unbiased, and that how there's some AI tools that can do that. And it covers 3 different segments on that in this article. But what is simplistic as you could take this out is using an AI tool that is evaluating phone calls and or Zoom meetings and coming back that says things like, and I'd love to do this and start looking at this more. I look at, as an example, we use within LeadSmart, we use Fathom.ai and their meeting recording tool that gives you an AI analysis and so forth. But if we started running that analysis through ChatGPT or another tool that came back and gave us some analysis that says, hey, because this is probably what I would be guilty of, is you talked 62% of the time and your prospect talked X amount of time, right? Or you missed talking to them about this particular problem that they had mentioned. Those are the types of coaching tools that AI can bring. And now when I'm having a conversation with a salesperson, it's not about my unconscious bias or what I think about something. It's like, these are the details. Let's work together on how we can make this better.
Yeah, and there's been tools like this, that have been used predominantly in the tech industry for a long
Mhm.
time. You have the record calls and so
Yeah.
forth. But yes, I agree. And I think even going one step further from coaching is just overall enablement,
Right.
right? And enabling, just like we talked about earlier about the phone call, when when a call comes into an inside rep and they have at their fingertips what they need to have the most efficient and valuable call with the
Right.
customer.
Yep.
So Yeah, I think I agree. And I think that coaching is just the start of things. I think coaching then ends up into really a broader enablement
Right.
play at that
Yep.
point.
Yeah. There has been a few comments that we've had here kind of questioning about, are we getting too wrapped up in AI and missing the core competencies and the core business goals that we need to think about, which is fine. I think the reality of it is we don't need to pick between those in business, right? We need to be focused on driving our business ahead, strategy, all of the things that were mentioned in a few of the comments that we've seen here. But at the same time, there is no escaping the technology component of these things. So it's not an if and or do we drop everything and go to that? No, we need to do all of those things in our businesses. And I mean, you made a comment earlier on some things we need to do better at LeadSmart within our business that you and I run. So I think it's not an if or it's an and, not an if or is really what
Well,
it comes.
I do agree that there is a maybe an undue attention on a lot of places on AI as like some sort of savior.
Yeah.
I think what unfortunately is missing is, and I do agree, is that with what Bob's saying is that there is a reduced focus on some of the strategy, but I think a lot of that is because we don't know how to actually build the right strategy utilizing AI into the DNA of that strategy,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And I think that's going to be a big part of the next 12 to 24 months is how do you really incorporate the AI aspect of things into the DNA of the strategy and the core competencies of the business. And
Mhm.
that's not easy, but it's because it's so different, it's hard, I think, right? It's easy to incorporate or easier to incorporate things that we know already and understand real well. It's not as easy to do that. So as a result, we end up playing a lot with AI really rather than building into the DNA of what we're doing.
Yeah. I have a little different take than what I think. It's not too far off, but what you're both saying, what I'm seeing from the people that I talk to every day, and this is the great thing about getting out to live events is, in our world and why we're here is talking about manufacturing, wholesale distribution. The event I was at earlier this week, there was 30 plus manufacturers and I can't remember the number. I think it was well over 250 distributors represented there. I probably got to talk with 30 different distributors. And what I'm seeing is that nobody is pushing pause on anything else that they're doing in their business to go say, I've got to go run and do AI. What they're doing is driving their business ahead and trying to start getting and it's really a lot of people aren't even going this far yet. But the ones that are looking at it and saying, well, how can I use this? I need to understand what's going on. I want to go to the talks about these things. I might even go to some events. I'm going to tune into Around the Horn, whatever else, whether MDM stuff, um, NEW stuff, NAED stuff, and try and get my arms around this. I'm not seeing anybody saying, I'm running off the deep end right now. In fact, I would go almost the reverse. That is, if you were to look at the majority of the companies out there that are focused on AI versus just technology and business tools in general, but if AI is their total focus, is they're not getting the take rates that they would like to from these markets that we talk about. That people are managing their business, trying to be aware, but to the point that Bob was saying, and again, one guy's opinion is. What Bob was saying, what you're saying, my take on this is that we're probably at the top of the hype cycle. In fact, probably past that now in AI. And now people have said, okay, I put a lot of energy. Maybe I went to a conference, watching some webinars, doing some things. Now I kind of get a feel for it. Now let's see what comes available that can really help me in my business. And now we'll see that fall off a little bit. And then eventually we'll get to that place where AI is ubiquitous in business. But I'm not seeing anybody that's saying, at least in my travels, anybody that's saying, let's drop everything, only work on this. Right. So, it's all right. We don't have to agree every time.
Well, I don't think that's happening either. I don't think
Yeah.
that's happening either. But I do think it's going to have to start permeating maybe a bit faster into the overall strategy of the business.
Yeah. Good. Well, we were going to go fast on that. And we didn't. So let's
Yeah.
jump into our, let's jump into our people and leadership segment. We have 3 articles this week. One's from hrdrive.com. Employees have forged ahead with generative AI while companies lag behind. This is a McKinsey report. It kind of ties into what we've just been talking about. Employees are, I think there was trying to remember what the number was. It talks about 91% of survey respondents saying they use AI for work through internal or publicly available tools. But I think what we probably would see if we really peeled that onion back is that they're publicly available tools, not necessarily company tools.
They're
And the
absolutely
question,
not company tools. Yeah,
yeah,
they're absolutely
and,
not company tools.
and there is big risk at that, is what is discussed here. So companies are going to need to get caught up on this stuff as well. So, any thoughts on that before we jump ahead? We've got a couple
No,
of
I
things.
think was a good summary.
Yeah, good. So another article here about succession planning, key to retaining supply chain expertise. Millennials, people are changing. I can't remember. Oh, I heard this stat while I was traveling this week. The number of baby boomers that are retiring daily. I was astounded by the number. I mean, literally, I was astounded is probably an understatement. So we know on the B2B side of things that was 62% of B2B buyers are millennials. We're seeing that on all sides of distribution. And now this is talking about on the supply chain of, do you have a succession plan in place for getting the right people to come in, learn that tribal knowledge, learn the other data that's available there to help things move ahead. So how was that summary? Is that all
Good.
right?
Well done. Well done.
All right. But this one's important. The last one here from HR Dive. U.S. women aren't projected to reach full pay equity until 2048. That's 24 years. That's just stupid.
Yeah,
Why do we have
I
that?
was actually quite shocked about this, about some of the data in here. It's like,
Yeah, and I mean it says despite progress in closing the gender pay gap, U.S. women still earn about 15% less than men. I rarely meet a woman that's not smarter than me. So this to me doesn't make any sense.
yeah, I don't. So maybe we need to cut your pay and give the women more, I think, is what we got to do.
I'm sorry. Something wrong with your microphone.
Yeah, it's all right. Let's keep going.
All right. We'll dive into our industry scuttlebutt section we do each week, a little bit about Motion Industries and an acquisition. The next one we talk about here, it's from Industrial Distribution Magazine, a distribution solutions group, which is also goes by DSG here in the U.S., closes their Source Atlantic acquisition. Source Atlantic is, I think I met with a group from at the event I was at this week from Source Atlantic. Great group, broadline distribution, everything from industrial across to bearings and power transmission. Was just acquired. The two people I met with were senior level managers and were absolutely ecstatic about this acquisition. They go from the Maritimes in Canada across almost all the provinces. I think they're in 5 provinces in Canada, and they're growing. So cool acquisition to see. Congratulations to both sides of that deal. There was an article here that I want to dig into further and read closer myself. It's from Modern Distribution Management. We get a lot of our data and share a lot back and forth with folks from MDM. I had to spend over an hour with Tom Gale from the founder of MDM, who's just sold the company to the National Association of Wholesalers. And Tom is just a wealth of wisdom. We sat for well over an hour over a beer and just chatted about the market and distribution. And just, Tom, if you're listening today, thanks for that time, because it was really valuable to me. We had a great time. But they had this article about former steel distributor executive pleads guilty to price fixing. And this was related to, I think, pipe, valve, and fitting stuff. And I'm sorry, it wasn't. It was related to rebar and steel within construction. Yeah. Don't play those games, right? You won't go to jail. So
You better get the FTC on them.
That's right. There you go, Lee. Back to the con corner in Around the Horn and Wholesale Distribution. Right. So we have a segment each week called Good Reads. Tom, did you take a look at that from Fast Company 5 Strategies to avoid mid-year burnout this summer?
I did. I was surprised that they said how many people were the FOMO that people get from watching social media of people on vacation and then, beaches and all that kind of stuff. I had never thought of that.
It's all the tourism ad dollars
That's right.
going out there, and with influencers and so forth. But you know, we always try in that good read section. Oftentimes, it might be from Fast Company or from Inc. magazine, and that segment we try and, you know, not necessarily focus just on the business standpoint, but sometimes it's the personal side of things too. So again, if you don't get the newsletter, let us know, and you'll get that each week. I did want to jump. I'm going to pass by. We have a segment there called A Second Look each week. If we've talked about some things before, there's a strike at the world's largest copper mine, which threatens prices. Stop and think about that. If you know, you drive down the street, at least here in Southern California where I'm at, it's all you hear about is people, you know, knocking over light posts to strip the copper wiring out of it to sell it, and now we could have a shortage that is going to threaten those prices even more. So that's something we'll pay attention to. But we talked quite a bit today, Tom, about AI, and we do that regularly. David Gordon, that publishes electricaltrends.com, he does a similar publication for the HVAC market, and he's been on the show with us. Going to get him back soon again. He did a whole segment on ChatGPT prompts for electrical salespeople, and I loved it. I mean,
It was real practical, real good practical information.
So David, thank you. I know he joins us fairly regularly if you're with us. I thought it was just really solid because it's easy for us to talk at, you know, 30,000 foot level about the things that happen with AI, which was what we really typically do. He broke it down and says, so instead of us talking about all the tools that it can help an electrical salesperson or an HVAC salesperson or whatever, he's breaking down prompts about what to ask ChatGPT or whatever tool you're using, and that will really be beneficial. So if you don't follow David Gordon on LinkedIn, do so. Electricaltrends.com is his publication as well. So good stuff there. So I just thought it was so practical.
Yep, it was really well done.
All right, what else do we have before we close it out today?
I think that's enough. I think that is enough.
We went fast. We covered a lot.
A lot of ground.
Yep, good. We appreciate the comments for today.
Yeah, thanks, Bob and Brian. Some really good insights. Appreciate that.
Any big weekend plans, my friend?
Not big ones, no.
I'm gonna get to the beach. Ankle's doing so much better. I've got to be gone a lot over the next few months, so I'm gonna take some time with the wife this weekend and get some toes in the sand.
Send me some pictures, and then I can have FOMO from you being at the beach.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I'll send you a picture of my my IPA and toes in the sand if everything plays out. So we'll go from there. Well, everybody, thanks for being with us. I'm Kevin Brown. I'm here with Tom Burton. Tom and I have been friends since kindergarten. We now work together at LeadSmart Technologies. We get together each week, and we talk about trends in the economy and mergers and acquisitions and supply chain and all of these things. And hopefully we can bring some value. Again, what we mentioned earlier today is if you get any value out of this, follow us, subscribe, leave a review if you're on the podcast, share with your friends, and we'll get the word out, and will allow us to keep doing that. We couldn't do this if we didn't have the help of the company that Tom and I work for, LeadSmart Technologies. Again, if you're in the wholesale distribution or manufacturing world and you're trying to navigate your future related to the world of AI, customer intelligence, and accelerated growth within your business, we would love to talk to you and share with you how our technology tools can help you in that growth and have that kind of conversation. So that's it for us today. Tom, you're still smiling. I think Bob, I don't know, Bob, if we can let him, but I've never been insulted like that in my life. Tom says, I think you're actually fraternal twins. That's it. I'm done. I'm out. I'm not coming back next week.
Bob is blackballed from all further episodes.
Right. You know, what's funny is I guess that teaches me for disagreeing with Bob's take on something a little earlier today. So that's a funny closing comment. So at that note, everybody, have a wonderful weekend. We hope to see you next week. We'll have probably new news next week on how many interest rate cuts there are going to be based upon what happens in the U.S. economy this week. But we thank you for being with us. Have a great weekend. Be kind, be safe, and do good things.
Thanks, everyone.